Hello and welcome. My name is Gabby Sanchez-Jones, and I am the manager of Alumni Clubs and Diverse Community Engagement here at the University of Utah's Alumni Relations Office. We are fortunate today to be joined by wonderful panelists who are also University of Utah alumni. Maida Sadana was born and raised in Helsinki, Mexico. When she was 11 years old, she immigrated to the US, where she established deep roots within the US and Utah immigrant community. Myra started her activism in the immigrants' rights movement when she was 15 years old, and she marched to the state capitol for the first time to demand a halt on immigration raids. Myra attended the University of Utah and graduated in 2010 with a degree in sociology. A few months after graduation, she started working at CU, Comunidades Unidas. CU is the leading organization at the forefront of the immigrants' rights and justice movement in Utah. For the last 21 years, CU has empowered the Latinx community to recognize its potential and become a positive force for change. Myra's journey at CU began 10 years ago, and she now serves as the executive director. She feels that those years have been most transformational and empowering in her life. In her free time, Myra enjoys dancing, stargazing, ice cream, chocolate, popcorn, and tacos. Thank you so much for being here with us, Myra. Our next panelist is Ms. Nubia Peña, who is the director for the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs, where their mission is to promote an inclusive climate for Utah's growing diverse community through training, outreach, and youth leadership development. Ms. Peña received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Utah S.J. Quinney College of Law in May 2016. In her current role, she facilitates dialogue amongst local and national leaders on the complex topics of inclusion and racial justice, working to create equitable access to services and resources for disenfranchised communities. Ms. Peña also designs and implements various workshops on creating culturally relevant and gender-specific programming for at-risk communities, specifically when working with youth and adolescents. In addition, Ms. Peña is a national consultant dedicated to the bringing awareness to the intersections of trauma and the school-to-prison pipeline. She has worked with many organizations, including Utah Juvenile Defender Attorneys, Utah Coalition Against Sexual Assault, Royalty Rising Youth Ministry, and as a law enforcement victim advocate. During her time at the U, she was selected as one of 25 law students in the nation to be recognized for her social justice activism in the National Jurist. Ms. Peña was also awarded and was a recipient of the National Juvenile Justice Network 2019 Emerging Leader Award. Likewise, she was one of Utah Business Magazine's 2020 40 Under 40 award recipients. We are so grateful to have her serve additionally as a member of the Board of Governors here at U Alumni. Nubia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so very much, Gabby, for the invitation, and a warm hello to our alumni community. I look forward to engaging in this conversation for this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you. We will first hear from each of our speakers individually, and then we will have a discussion surrounding questions that were submitted by our audience beforehand. If you have any additional questions you would like to pose to the presenters, we invite you to use the chat function on YouTube to share them with us. Myra, could you please start us off?
Thank you, Gabby, and thank you. And hi, everyone. I'm Maida Sadana once again, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am a community organizer, and I also have the privilege to be Comunidades Unidas Executive Director. And I want to share with you a little bit about my experience at the U. So I graduated about 10 years ago, so it's been quite a long time. And I know that a lot of things have changed in the last decade. So I immigrated to the US back in 1998. I came to the US as an undocumented immigrant. At that time, I didn't know what that meant. And for a very long time, I kept my status to myself and to a very few people. I think that back then, a lot of us didn't share our status, indeed our immigration status, because we were very protective of our own family members. I wasn't the only one that was undocumented in my family. So, I was really, really careful with not sharing any of that information with anybody else. So I went to junior high, then I graduated from Highline High School, and then I had the privilege to be part of a college prep program, which was really, really beneficial. That college prep program actually helped me with my resume. They helped me with my my letters. It was very, very helpful. And I'm so glad that, I was able to be part of the program, because without them, I knew I wasn't going to make it. So obviously, this is the early 2000s. Things were very different back then, and we didn't had DACA, and practically we didn't have anything. However, it was in the early years of 2000s when some of our congressional delegates and other leaders were starting a conversation about the DREAM Act. Yes, the DREAM Act. We've been fighting for the DREAM Act for now more than 20 years now. So back in the early 2000s, I was also very privileged that at that time we had in-state tuition. So I benefited from in-state tuition. I also had the opportunity to have an advisor that actually, she took the time to learn everything about, the process and what that would mean for me. Once again, I want to remind everyone that back in the early 2000s, we didn't even had a Dream Center either. So a lot of the things and a lot of the processes, we had to learn them ourselves. I was also very, privileged in a way that I got the help to apply for scholarships. I was learning English, and I needed a lot of extra help with my application and my essays and so many other things. Once again, I didn't qualify for FAFSA or any other federal grants or any other federal aid because of my status. So once again, thanks to the advisor, I was able to get that extra help and support. I was able to apply for 10 different private scholarships, and I received 5 of them. So one of them was a full ride scholarship. So definitely that made the whole difference for me. That scholarship actually allowed me to go to the U without having to worry about paying for my tuition, paying for my books. Now, I do have to also recognize that as a working class individual, I had to work, right? Because I had to pay for gas. I still had to pay for my food. I still had to pay for rent. So a lot of my experience at the U was going to class and going to my classes and then driving back home and to my work. So I wasn't really involved at the U. The first years as a student, I was able to join MECHA, Movimiento Estudiantil Chicana Chicano de Aztlán. I know they're changing their name, but back in the early 2000s, it was called MECHA, and I was able to really connect with other Latinx and other immigrants in that group. However, until that day, I was still very secretive about my immigration status. I only knew about 5 other students that were experiencing the same things that I was going through as an undocumented student. So that was definitely very hard for me. Another important thing that I want to share too is that every single year around springtime, it was very, very stressful for me because every single year during the 5 years that I was at the U, I was called into the scholarship office. They had a very serious conversation with me and they told me, well, hey, Mayra, this year they are trying to remove in-state tuition. And if they do, unfortunately, we're going to have to see if we will be able to pay for your tuition. So obviously, as an undocumented student, to hear that and to leave with that uncertainty was very hard. That was very, very hard in my mental health because I didn't know if I was able to graduate. My dreams and my future was in the limbo. So I do want to recognize that obviously that is hard, and I think that I can connect my experience with the experiences of so many documented and undocumented students that are going through the same thing right now. So right after graduation, I was able to adjust my immigration status, and I immediately started working at Comunidades Unidas, CU. I remember that I was at the library at the U, I was updating my resume, and then all of a sudden I was looking for a new job. And, I was on the UNA, the Utah Nonprofits Association website, and I was surprised to learn that there was a nonprofit that had its name in Spanish. I was like, oh, wow. So I looked into the website, and they had an opening for a volunteer coordinator. And I looked at the deadline, and the deadline was that exact same day, 5 p.m. And I was at the library back then. I think it was like 9 p.m. So I decided to apply. I said, well, you know what? I'm just going to apply. And then minutes after, I received an invitation for an interview. And then the next day at 2 p.m., I was hired at Comunidades Unidas. So I've been there for 10 years. And like I said, it's been one of the most amazing experiences of my life. I've grown so much as an individual, and I've also grown so much as a professional. And one of the campaigns that I did was in-state tuition. So yes, I know that Utah was one of the first states to have in-state tuition in place for undocumented students. However, every single year, from the time that it was instituted until I think 2012, we've been fighting back to keep in-state tuition. So one of the first campaigns that I did as a new employee was, fighting to keep in-state tuition. As a recent graduate, I immediately contacted a lot of students that I knew that were undocumented and that benefited from in-state tuition, and we were able to testify in front of our state legislature. Immigrant rights is my passion, so definitely, being undocumented has shaped my life, my values, and everything that I do for myself, my family, and my community. Fast forward to everything that we're doing, I think that I was a volunteer coordinator for quite some time, and I was also running our immigration campaigns and programs for 9 years. So obviously immigration, it's in my veins. That's what I love, and that's what really excites me. And my dream, my goal is that one day we'll have a comprehensive and humane immigration reform. And throughout the years, I've been working really closely with so many students at the U. I'm really proud to say that a lot of our former interns and volunteers are now either my really good colleagues, some of them are now CU staff members, and some of them are now some of our best partners and collaborators. I also want to say that Comunidades Unidas provides so many different opportunities for students. We have so many different campaigns, everything around immigrant rights and immigrant justice, also access to health. We do a lot of hands-on. I know that things are a little different now with COVID-19, but I think that something that really differentiates Comunidades Unidas from so many other places is that, we really try to engage, and we recognize the values and the knowledge that everyone brings. And we've been able to do our work because of the time and the effort and all the heart that our volunteers and interns bring to our movement. Another thing that I do want to share is that obviously, when COVID-19 hit, I came into this role as an executive director December of last year. So 3 months later, I became the executive director, and it's been very, very difficult. But I immediately knew that we needed to be in the front lines of COVID-19. We have a lot of experience as a nonprofit working with issues related to access to health and immigrant rights and immigrant justice. So we knew that we needed to be out there advocating for the rights rights and for the dignity of our immigrant community. We knew that our communities were going to be one of the hardest hits just because of all the historical context. And, acknowledging that a lot of our working class, a lot of our immigrant families are already, even before COVID-19, they were, experiencing many barriers. So right now, I'm really proud to say that our team has extended to 33 of us. We have a whole group of promotoras, community health workers that are actually doing a lot of the contract tracing. A lot of them are calling families to connect them with services. We have a CU line that operates from Mondays through Thursdays. And we're actually, we're able to connect families with the resources that they need. And another important element in all of this is that we know and we recognize the importance of advocating and actually making long-term changes. So we've been working really closely with Nubia and other partners in making sure that a lot of the systems are changed in order to bring more services and more justice to our immigrant communities and other communities of color. So I'll be sharing more in the next few minutes, but thank you.
So much, Maida. We appreciate you taking the time to share all of that with us. Nubia, if you would be willing to speak next.
Absolutely. Thank you so very much, Gabby. And I think I just want to pause for just a moment to acknowledge and give a lot of just honor and acknowledgement to Myra, my dear sister in the movement, who has just really lifted and moved mountains. And the amount of heart that she comes into this space every single day, the passion she has for serving on the front lines. I really just wanted to, again, take a moment to say thank you, Myra. On behalf of myself, our team at the Division of Multicultural Affairs, we're very grateful that we can do this work in partnership with you. So as a brief introduction to me and who I am, where I came from, I was also born in Mexico. I was born in Puebla and I came into the United States at the age of 4. I am an identical twin and my mama raised 4 girls, predominantly as a single parent. And when we first came to the United States, we also didn't necessarily have status, right? We didn't have our papers. And it was a really interesting experience recognizing for the very first time what it meant to live in the shadows, right? Like what it meant to be concerned, what it meant to be afraid of potentially either being deported or being considered and labeled a person that didn't belong. We were naturalized. I was naturalized at the age of 18. My mother was a teacher in Mexico. And when she came here, without the opportunity to work legally, she did whatever she could to survive and to take care of her kids. And so she was helping families who had children with special needs. And she was also cleaning houses. And eventually she was able to go to school and became a medical assistant. And through one of her job opportunities, she was sponsored. And from that gave us the opportunity to then be naturalized under her. But I was 18 when I was officially considered a US citizen. And from there, that eventually led to me trying to navigate an understanding of what does it mean to be a person of color, Latina, immigrant, someone that identifies as Mexican American, and really spending time to unpack that. And all of my higher education experience, I would say that I dedicated time to wanting to make sure that I gave to our community, to our Latino community. So when I started as a volunteer at Unified Police Department, it was formerly known as the Sheriff Department. A lot of the time that I spent was working as an advocate, but really strategically being placed as a primary contact for communities that only spoke Spanish and undocumented families and undocumented survivors. And that was a humbling experience because not only were survivors of violence, domestic abuse, sexual assault, human trafficking, and violent crimes trying to navigate a system, but then in addition to that, they were afraid because they had been conditioned, they had been told by their perpetrator, the abuser, who was in many ways omnipotent in their minds that, they were going to be deported or that they weren't going to be believed or that they were going to be charged because they were here illegally. So trying to create the type of outreach to communities where they could see someone who looked like them, speak their language, and tell them that there were people who were wanting to help them not only survive, but really thrive, to find freedom and liberation. So through that, also becoming very familiar with U visa and T visa programs. So that is for survivors of domestic abuse and trafficking, where they're able to find and qualify for legal status. It is a complicated process, but there are exceptional partners in our community. I want to acknowledge Holy Cross Ministries, who does a lot of the VAWA and T visa and U visa programs for survivors. I know that Maida Sadana and her team also do a lot of work in referring out and supporting families. Utah Legal Services, right? So there's a lot of services if you don't know where to seek, or if you're potentially in a situation where you're a survivor of abuse and don't have status, please know that there might be some options. And it'd be important for you to reach out knowing that we might be able to assist. So with that process and with that career, that eventually branched out to me recognizing as I would go to court and I would sit with survivors of abuse, oftentimes those who were undocumented, I would see the way the system treated them. And similar to what Myra said, there was a lack of dignity, there was a lack of humanity, there was a lack of respect for the complexity of their experiences. Oftentimes they would be told, like, well, why do they keep going back? Or why don't they testify? Or why don't they stay gone, right? And it was so layered because obviously we know not only culturally, but on top of that, we're looking at the layers of complexity in terms of the immigration system, of the legal system. And so seeing that firsthand and witnessing time and time again how the survivors, the clients that I was serving were treated, I recognized, I want to be on the front lines, helping, advocating, supporting, and in some way seeking and demanding justice for people who were undocumented and were afraid of telling their truth, their story. So I decided to pursue law school. But before that, I was able to serve as the Racially Just Utah Project Coordinator. And oh no, actually I went to law school first. So I went to law school, and in there I realized, I thought I was going to be a prosecutor. I thought I was going to be someone that, was able to work directly with survivors. But very clearly and very quickly on, I recognized that there was a different calling on my life, and it was to work with our children in the system. And it was because I saw so many of the kids that were system involved, they were from our community. So even though Latino community is only 14% in the state of Utah, we saw upwards to 65% of the caseloads in the state of Utah court systems being people of color, being children of color, being Latino. So there was a passion that was ignited in me. I wanted to explore that. And so I was able to pursue a pathway of understanding, what is the school to prison pipeline? What is it doing to our children? What is it doing to children who are limited English proficient, or come from undocumented families, or who are children with disabilities, children who are homeless, those who are in foster care? Because again, identities are so intersectional. And so one child could belong to many of these categories that we just named. And how was the system treating them? And was it being humane? Was it being mindful of the complexity of their identities? So with the School to Prison Pipeline, I was able to do not only a class, we were able to co-author a report that talked about how there was disproportionate impact of children of color. And I started to very quickly realize, like, this is where my heart is. I want to help our children. And so I was hired on by one of my peers and mentors and friends, Pam Vickery at the Utah Juvenile Defender Attorneys, right out of law school. And I was given the opportunity to serve as a juvenile defender in our community. And I got to tell you, it was one of the most transformative experiences to work with children and family who, again, belong to undocumented and mixed status families, because there was so many fears, there was so much misconceptions, there was so many times where I would sit with the family and talk to them about their rights. And those conversations oftentimes extended beyond just the juveniles' rights, but also talking about what could they do to seek after resources to support them and help them. And many times I would refer them to Comunidades, Unidas, knowing that they were working on the front lines to support families. So I did that for about 3 years, and then fast forward that opportunity to where I am now. I'm the director of the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs. And it has been an incredible blessing to know that I can serve in this capacity, that I'm working with a team that is multicultural backgrounds, incredibly diverse, and that consistently we are asking ourselves, who are the voices that are missing from the conversations that we are having? How do we center racial equity? What can we do to make sure that we open the doors, right? And not only open doors, because I want to challenge that, like who's closing the doors behind us, but that we're breaking the hinges off the doors, right? Like that we are making sure that people can continue to walk through and access opportunities where they see themselves represented, not only in state government, but they see themselves represented in positions of influence and leadership. And also that we learn how to define and redefine what power looks like for our students, for our youth, for our community partners, and how can we be in collaboration and partnership so that it is an opportunity to share that space. So we are working right now on trying to expand an understanding for communities of colors, specifically those that have been hardest hit by COVID-19, about available resources. So our division was appointed to serve as, to oversee the Multicultural Advisory Committee of Utah's COVID-19 response. And we have 7 work groups that are trying to access information to distribute and make sure that it is getting to the farthest reaches of Utah, to our communities of color and multicultural populations, but specifically those that have been disproportionately affected by COVID-19 and the pandemic. What are the services available? So food security, housing and social services, health equity as it relates to policy initiatives. How can we make sure that communication is available in multiple languages? How can we make sure that mental health is also centered in our response? How can we ensure that information is being distributed in native languages, right? So we're thinking through some of those barriers and thinking through some of those opportunities to not only work in partnership with those on the front lines, because again, as I mentioned, Myra, who is one of our she sits on the advisory committee. How can she tell us how we can do things better? Because she's on the front lines in a way that I am not. Or how can we work with people like, Multicultural Counseling Center, who is directly serving populations? How can they inform us? Or Susie from Pick to Car, or Margarita Satini from UPSEC. Like there's all of these leaders, Betty Sawyer with Project Success Coalition, all of these leaders who are showing up daily, and we want to know how we can elevate and amplify their efforts. So one of the things that I do want to note is that we have launched a Racial Equity and Inclusion Fund. That was one of the long-term, short-term initiatives that we had hoped to implement as an advisory committee to make sure that the funds that were coming out of the legislators, the special legislative session, would be able to address some of the things that we saw were continuing to happen, which was the inability to access or to have rental assistance provided to families who were in desperate emergency needs right now. So having those funds distributed to the nonprofit organizations on the front lines may be able to reduce a couple of steps so that families don't necessarily have to worry about eviction, or food security is a concern. If they're not able to access pantries for whatever reason, whether it's lack of transportation or lack of navigating our systems, knowing how to navigate those systems, that they might be able to provide some support through this new initiative. So if you're interested in that, I invite you to visit our website and explore our website about available resources that we've developed in partnership with many others. And again, we'd be happy to answer any questions while I'm on the panel here or in the aftermath. So with that, Gabby, I really want to make sure that we leave some space and time for questions, and I'll pause there.
Thank you so much. Thank you to both Nubia and Myra. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your story and all of the expertise you bring to us with your community leadership. Our first question was presented from an audience member, which I think is really important and can help us clarify just the general understanding of what being undocumented means. And the question is, why are students undocumented? What are some of those things that are in place in the United States education system that make it not possible for students to become naturalized and citizens when they enter higher education? And I think with this is an excellent time for you both to kind of speak to explaining what DACA is and how people have access to that.
I think I'll be happy to address the question about DACA and the system. So I think that an important element to kind of know and to recognize is that our immigration system is part of it is primarily based on what we called immigration based on family, meaning the way that I, for instance, for example, the way that I was able to adjust my status was through my dad. So my dad became a legal permanent resident, and then he was able to petition for me and my mom. So that's one of the, that's one pathway, right? I know that when it comes to students and immigrants in general, I think that it depends on, every situation is different, right? We have a variety of different situations. For instance, we have students that actually came to the US with a tourist visa. We also have a number of people that came without any documents. We also have another set of groups that that comes with what we call student visas and other kinds of visas. So it's very complex. I wouldn't be able to explain the whole thing within like 3 minutes, but to stick to DACA, I think that it's important to recognize, like I said, that we've been fighting for something, right? For a very long time. We haven't had an amnesty since 1986. So it's been a very long time. And at the beginning, in the early 2000s, we were fighting for a DREAM Act. So it was a great moment when a lot of our congressional delegation and so many other leaders recognized that there were some of us, right, and many of us out here that came as children without any documents. So, we and a lot of our families were really rallying to have some kind of protection for those of us, for those small children that came to the US without anything. Now, nothing happened, unfortunately, out of the 2000 DREAM Act legislation. So we continued to fight for something more comprehensive. So we said, well, hey, you know what? Let's fight for comprehensive immigration reform. So in I would say 2007, 2010, we then said, okay, let's fight for our families, comprehensive immigration reform for all. It didn't happen. And then when we, back in 2011, when we had President Obama in the office, we said, well, hey, you know what, let's try to do something, right? The president has the power to do an executive order. So, we did a lot of marches, we did a lot of story sharing, and I want to recognize that we had DACA and we have DACA because of the power of the people, right? Obviously, we want to say thank you to former President Obama, but it's important to recognize that our communities have been fighting for something and for legalization for a very long time. So DACA and anything else, it's thanks to the people and thanks to all of those courageous people that are sharing their stories, that are taking the streets, and that are actually making noise and demanding justice and dignity for our families. So here comes fast forward to 2012, we're able to get DACA. And I want to say that currently where we are with DACA is that our current administration is doing everything in their power to dismantle the program little by little, not only for DACA, but for so many other immigration services and benefits for immigrants and refugees.
Thank you so much, Myra. Nubia, do you have anything to add?
Sorry, Gabby. As Myra mentioned, no, I think I really appreciate that she was able to provide the context, especially as how, it's important for faculty and students alike to understand that there are those who are going to be limited status as well as those that have no status, right? And so some carry some protection and some availability to be able to access and navigate resources, while others really create a lot of barriers. And so my hope is more than anything is that this panel will be just maybe an opportunity for people to think, what else don't I know about working with undocumented students? What else am I missing? And then also explore how, as we're diving into conversations around anti-Black racism, because of the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that we're experiencing at the national level as well as local with our current climate, that we also start to think about the intersections and how anti-Black racism has also allowed and permitted for certain policies and practices to exclude people from the Latino community, people from Asian communities, people from Pacific Islander communities. Like, how do we continue to unpack this dialogue so that we're really thinking through what barriers exist, and how do we as a university, how do we as an institute make sure that we're thinking through those concerns and creating safe and brave spaces so that anyone who is a student and trying to achieve higher education and greater access for a thriving life, that they're able to do that at this school. So my hope is, Gabby, that this is not the first or last, but that, well, that this is the first, but not the last of our opportunities to unpack this.
Thank you so much. Building on that, there is a question wondering what the future holds for those undocumented students who do not qualify for DACA and do not have that status. Do either of you have anything to share on that topic?
I would defer to Myra to see if she has anything to share here.
We know that and I'm really proud to say that now we have a Dream Center at the U, which is something that we didn't have back when I was there. So I know that the Dream Center is providing a lot of different resources to students, both documented students and undocumented students. And I think it's also important to recognize that there are so many other community resources that we as Comunidades Unidas are able to provide for students. Where we are right now is I think that we are really trying to fight for a permanent solution for those that are undocumented and documented. And something that I forgot to say is that DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and DACA is very limited. I do want to say that, yeah, it was a big win since, when we got it in 2012, but it's very limiting. In our state, like I mentioned, we have in-state tuition, and I know for a fact that DACA has opened the doors to so many students and so many other individuals within our communities. But I think it's also important to recognize that it's very limiting with DACA. In comparison to it, it's not a green card, it's not citizenship, and it's very limiting. So I think it's also important to recognize that although it's a great program, we still will continue to fight to have something bigger and more comprehensive and more humane for our 11 million undocumented immigrants in the United States.
Thank you so much. Let's kind of switch to that access of education and the experience there. Is there any advice that you have for people who are kind of starting their academic career, having been two successful alumni who have, gone to school and succeeded?
Sorry, Gabby. So is this for our students or for our alumni? Can you rephrase the question?
Yeah, so for pretty much anyone who's entering the higher education world, that could be, coming into your undergrad, or a returning student who's coming to kind of pursue a secondary degree like you did.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Yes, when so I graduated from the University of Utah with my bachelor's, and then I pursued my law school at the S.J. Quinney College of Law. And I'll say that there was about maybe 6 years in between. And it was hard coming back because I had already had several years of a professional career under my belt, and trying to navigate those spaces with some of my peers was challenging. And so what I recognized was absolutely necessary for me was to find a support system. I needed to know that there were mentors, that there were people that would be able to unpack and process with me, that as I had questions, as I tried to figure out how do I accomplish these goals while I'm also trying to navigate paying a mortgage or raising a family or supporting my loved ones. Like, how do I create that balance in my life? And so having not only professors that I could turn to, but professionals at the University of Utah that I could identify as people that would be champions and advocates for me, knowing that there were folks that were invested in seeing not only a Latina, but also someone that perhaps first generation, someone that, was bilingual and had already had several experiences in their life that they wanted to help influence how we open doors. And I was grateful. I will really say that at the University of Utah, there were several people that I can think of were deeply invested in seeing me grow and have continued that same pattern of success with other students. So I'm encouraging you, reach out. If there are alumni, if there are professors, if there are professionals that you think would be a good fit for you, send them an email, ask them to connect with you over the phone, see if they would be willing to spend an hour with you to maybe just process who are people that I need to network with, what are the next steps that I need to take, and what are some key things that I need to do to make sure that I stay balanced and grounded as I navigate this. That'd be my advice. Myra, how about you?
So my advice would be to do internships. I know I didn't have the opportunity to do internships while I was at the U, but I did have the opportunity to do internships when I was in high school. And I have so many years of experience working with students, and I've seen so many amazing things. So I highly recommend that you all get involved either with an agency, with a business, with a nonprofit of your preference. I think that internships bring a lot of value to an experience, right? I am very proud to say that, I think that in the last 10 years, I've worked with more than 100 students. And I'm also really proud to say that, especially for those that are interested in immigration and immigrant rights and justice, out of all the interns that I've worked with, many of them, I would say, I think I was counting about 10 of them, after they finished their internship with us, were able to write letters of recommendation. And 10 of them actually got to do internships in Washington, D.C. So I'm very proud to say that, we are a space where we value our interns and our volunteers, and we're highly invested in really connecting with them and creating channels for their personal growth and their professional growth. Another important thing too is, getting involved just brings a lot of different experiences, and I think it's very valuable. Obviously, education is important, and what we're learning from the books is highly, highly important. But I also I also think that there is a lot of value in actually practicing what we're learning. So I highly encourage everyone to look for an internship, so you can actually get that hands-on experience. Thanks.
And Gabby, I'll just really quickly add and echo what Myra said. Right now, we have 4 fellows from the Hope Corps team at the University of Utah. And they have been exceptional. And they have it has been such a natural fit to have them join our team. And they're incredibly diverse. They each bring their own perspective. And at our division, we're really hoping that this is a foundational space where they're able to explore how they want to lead, how they want to contribute, what they want to give their community, and what type of projects they think are important to serve and to provide an answer to some of the gaps that we're seeing. So I absolutely agree with Myra. Internships are critical. That is also where you will network with people who may give you a job and extend an opportunity for future employment. They are the ones who will also write you letters of recommendation, as Myra mentioned right now. Or they're also ones that will become lifelong mentors that you can lean on and rely on to think once again about those critical questions of, how do I balance it all? I have to, raise a family, pay for bills, and also I want to be excellent in my profession. How do I do it? And again, those people can really help guide, shape, and then provide blueprints for you to follow. So excellent recommendation, Myra.
Thank you both so much. I think that's such a true statement, and I feel very fortunate to know that we, the University of Utah, have been providing students that get to work with you and learn from your leadership, which I think is so critical for those things that aren't necessarily taught in the classroom during that college experience. Our next question is focused on the university. Obviously, we know that we have a Dream Center now, which provides support to mixed status and undocumented students, as well as facilitates allyship on campus. But from your perspective, what can the university do as a whole to support the undocumented student population that is here?
Myra, do you want to start with this one since that was your lived experience as a student?
I'll get started with that. Yeah, I think that it's also important to recognize and uplift the stories of undocumented students and mixed status families. I think that it's also important that the University of Utah continues to invest. I think that's a very crucial and important element, that they continue to invest in bringing more services to undocumented and mixed status families. I think that that really shows a commitment, right? And I think it's important also to recognize that undocumented students are a part of the youth, that they are a critical element at the University of Utah, and that they're making a lot of contributions. So I really like the fact that with the newsletter that was recently published, we were able to uplift some of the stories of students or former students that were or are undocumented. And I think that that's important, and that's a very starting point. So sharing stories, very important, and then investments.
Gabby, I would also add to the conversation around investment. Scholarship opportunities are going to be critical to ensure that our students do feel that the University of Utah sees them, are considering some of the additional and layered complexities of their lived experience. The fact that, FAFSA is not available to certain students based on status. How is it also that we are acknowledging the intersectionalities of their identities? How are we creating spaces? How are we ensuring that that we're doing trauma-informed, culturally responsive, mindful, and inclusive educational experiences, that our classrooms are being taught by instructors and faculty that are mindful of that, and that are not in any way supporting rhetoric that could create a hostile environment. So what is the mission of the university? What is the commitment of the university to serve all students? And how is that consistently communicated, not only from president, but from each department, each of the individuals that have influence and power to dictate policies and practice? How are we showing up so that everyone feels safe in our school? That's what I think we can do. And I do want to give a shout out to Marianne Villarreal, which is a dear sister and friend. They are actively and proactively, through partnership and support of the president, considering these questions. And I think as they start to unpack, as I mentioned, anti-Black racism, we start to then peel back the layers of how that is embedded and entrenched in all of our systems, including immigration. So, thanks, Gabby.
Thank you so much. I think that's such a critical point as well. Obviously, the U has this inaugural position of Vice President for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, which is really monumental, and not something that either of you were fortunate to have during your time here, but that the students who are here now and who will be here moving forward do have that support system, which I think is so critical. And not all universities around the country are able to bring someone of such high caliber to serve the students in that capacity. Our next question is related to what you both spoke of. For students who are interested in interning with your wonderful organizations and departments, what is the best way to get that information?
So for Comunidades Unidas, it will be, you can go to our website, so cuutah.org, and there's actually a link where you can send us your information, or you can send an email at info@cuutah.org. I'll be happy to put that on the comments. And now that we're talking about interns and volunteers, I do want to give a shout out to some of our former interns that are here. So I want to give a shout out to Thais, who, she was part of Comunidades Unidas for a very long time, and she did an amazing job. So Thais, we miss you. And for those of you that would like to get engaged with Comunidades Unidas, we're here, and we'll be happy to have you. Now more than ever, there is so much to do. So we definitely need your talent and your time.
No, and for our division, it would be similar, but I would just ask that if people are interested to email me directly at npeña@utah.gov. We would love to hear from students that are interested in understanding state government, in wanting to have the opportunity to serve in that capacity, to explore what it would look like to potentially help coordinate and host experiences for our two commissions. We oversee the Martin Luther King Human Rights Commission that is co-chaired by Miss Emma Houston and Simba Maponge. And then we also have the Multicultural Commission, which is co-chaired by Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox and Byron Russell. So our interns and our fellows have an opportunity to interface with some of our state leaders, and they are also able to help influence what type of projects we lead out on and what type of initiatives we should be prioritizing. So we absolutely would welcome more help and assistance. And again, what we're excited about is that the three individuals that are currently full-time on our team, Claudia Loaiza, Rosanna Benali-Sag, and Jenny Howe, they all started as interns in our office before transitioning to full-time staff. So we always look to hire internal talent. We always look to see how we can open doors for greater opportunities. And again, our division would be happy to connect with any of our emerging leaders who are interested in partnering.
Thank you both so much. I think that's wonderful. And having been able to meet your staff at both organizations, I can definitely vouch that it's a wonderful working environment with such wonderful people to collaborate with. Our final question today that I would love to hear from both of you about is, what is one of the most important things that you wish all University of Utah staff, faculty, and students knew about the experience of undocumented students and alumni?
Myra,
it's an easy question.
Okay, it's a heavy question, Gabby. So
staff, faculty, and students knew about the experience.
Give me just a second. Okay. So one of the things that I would ask for our staff and faculty and students to know, I want to anchor it into something that Myra talked about during her introduction, is that she kept her status to herself. That was something also growing up, we didn't talk about it. We didn't discuss it openly because we understood the ramifications of sharing what that label meant. And that can sometimes carry weight, especially when in some of our political science classes or gender and race classes, we start to talk about the impacts of these intersections. How are those conversations being had where people are not going to be targeted, and people are not going to be excluded, and people are not going to be in some ways isolated based on other people's narrative or perception, right? There is a lot of, I would say, not only misconceptions, but there is a lot of negative rhetoric that is attached to what undocumented and mixed status families do and contribute to our community. And so I, again, would encourage, challenge, and invite, lovingly invite, that people understand the root of the system, that they really also understand the many different nuances of what people in our community are living through every day, even though oftentimes they're living in shadows, right? They're living under the radar. They're living in fear, in consistent fear that is oftentimes amplified, like it is right now with the pandemic, like it is right now when we have emergencies such as the windstorm, and people are without access to light, or there's damage to their properties, or we had an earthquake. Like, all of those things are experienced very differently from someone that is afraid of whether or not they will be treated either as the victim or as a perpetrator. So unpacking that, sitting with that, and then creating space to have those conversations, I think would be a really great first step.
Thank you, Nubia. And I do want to, and I want to say that I completely agree with that. I think that, just to piggyback on that, I think it's also important to understand that, being undocumented is very complex, and it shows up in so many different aspects of someone's life. So for instance, something that I neglected to share and that I want to share now is that so when I came to the US, I didn't know, honestly, I didn't know that I was going to cross the border, right? First of all. Second of all, I didn't know the implications of being undocumented. I think that it was 8 months later when I was raised by my great grandfathers in Mexico, because my parents immigrated to the US before I did. So when I came, I got reunited with them. And the moment that I realized that I was undocumented was when my great grandfather passed away. And I was the closest person to my great grandfather because he raised me since I was little. And I remember just getting on my knees and crying and telling my dad, I want to go to his funeral. I want to go to his funeral. And my dad got into his knees and he said, no, you can't, because I won't be able to bring you back again. So then immediately I was 11 years old and I realized what it meant to be undocumented, right? At that precise moment, I realized that it wasn't just about it is obviously a status, it is a paper, it is something that gives you, being undocumented, obviously it's so complex, but I realized that it shows up in so many different aspects of my daily life. So I just want to remind everyone of that because it's important, right? I think we're talking about education and what it means to be undocumented while, being at the U and so many other things. But I think it's also important to recognize that being undocumented shows up in other aspects of life, access to health. In my case, right, when I was little, not being able to go to my great grandfather's funeral, being the one that was closest to him, and so many other things, right? So I think it's also important to recognize and to just have that present because that's going to show up for people in so many other ways. So I think it's important to always make sure that we're being compassionate, but also that we're creating opportunities for undocumented immigrants to shine and to be their true selves. I think that's also incredible because our immigrant communities, our undocumented communities are talented. And talking about talent, another thing that I do want to say is that many times we also get caught between the good versus bad immigrant rhetoric. And I just also want to put that out there, right? Try not to play into that. And I think that we've stopped that. And as a movement, as an immigrant rights movement, I think that we made a huge mistake with that because many times we spend so many hours uplifting our documented individuals that actually got the opportunity to go to college and that are in college. But I do want to say, and I want to tell you that there's so many other amazing documented individuals in our state that are documented and that are not in college. Many of them are working, right? Many of them have amazing families, and it's also important to recognize their contributions.
Thank you so much. I think you both touched on some really essential aspects, and for me as a university employee, as someone who was privileged enough to be born into citizenship in the United States, I think we've had so many conversations about using privilege and power that we have within our own scope to make a difference. And I appreciate your messages as they can hopefully empower all of our campus community and community partners to use what privilege they have to help those around us. I want to thank you both so much for being here and for sharing your stories with us. And I want to also thank you for the work that you do in the community. I know that it expands so much further than our campus community, but it also impacts so many of our students, faculty, staff members. So thank you. Thank you very much. We here at the University of Utah are so grateful to call you our alumni, and we're grateful for your partnership in all things. Thank you to everyone who joined us today virtually. And as a reminder, this event can be accessed using the same link once the live stream ends. Please feel free to rewatch and share this content as you feel fits your needs. We look forward to having you join us in future virtual events, which are hosted weekly on the University of Utah Alumni Association's YouTube channel. Next month, we will be holding an event with the LGBT Resource Center here at the U to talk about services that are provided to students who have differing identities. We look forward to our partnership with all of you alumni in the future. Thank you and go Utes.